Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Olympus Prime watching the stars through the massive viewing window when the message arrived. The orbital defense station had been his home for 3 years now, and he knew every sound it made, when ships approached, or when the automated systems ran their daily checks. This sound was different. The communications officer turned toward him with a face that had gone completely white. "Sir, we have an incoming transmission from outside the solar system," Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez said with a shaky voice. "The signature is unlike anything in our databases." Jake walked over to the main console where dozens of screens showed radar, readings and sensor data. What he saw made his stomach drop. 500 massive shapes sat at the edge of their solar system like dark clouds waiting to bring a storm. Each ship was easily 3 times larger than humanity's biggest warship, and they had appeared without any warning. "Put the message through," Jake ordered while pressing the emergency alert button that would wake up every defense coordinator in the system. The main screen flickered and showed a creature that looked nothing like any human. Its skin was dark blue with silver markings, and its eyes were large and completely black. When it spoke, the words came through a translation device that made everything sound cold and mechanical. "I am War Commander Vexville of the Zephyrian Empire. Your species has been judged as dangerous to galactic peace and must be contained. You have 72 hours to surrender all military assets and submit to Imperial rule. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. This is your only warning." The screen went dark and Jake stared at it for several long seconds before the chaos began. Every communication channel started buzzing with calls from Earth and the outer colonies. Commander Lisa Grant's voice came through from the lunar base, asking for confirmation of what everyone had just witnessed. Captain Ryan Burke called from intelligence headquarters wanting immediate analysis of the alien fleet composition. Jake pulled up the tactical display and studied the enemy formation. The ships were arranged in perfect geometric patterns that suggested military precision beyond anything humans had achieved. Their energy signatures showed power levels that dwarfed the entire output of Earth's fusion reactors. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could probably vaporize a city with a single shot. "Get me President Santos immediately," Jake told his communications team while calculating how long it would take to mobilize humanity's scattered fleets. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings and desperate planning sessions. President Maria Santos called together the Global Defense Assembly while military commanders across 12 star systems tried to figure out how to fight an enemy that outgunned them 6-1. Every simulation they ran showed the same result. Humanity would be wiped out in less than a week. Colonel Steve Parker transmitted from Mars, refusing all suggestions that he evacuate his people. His mining crews were already working around the clock to convert industrial equipment into weapons, even though everyone knew it would barely scratch the alien ships. On Europa Station, Dr. Rachel Moore had locked herself in the research lab studying energy readings from the Zephyrian fleet, looking for any weakness they could exploit. The aliens had sent footage along with their ultimatum, showing what happened to other species that chose to fight. Entire planets turned to glass from orbital bombardment. Cities that had stood for thousands of years reduced to radioactive craters in minutes. Billions of lives snuffed out because their leaders had believed they could resist the Zephyrian Empire. Jake reviewed humanity's military assets one more time, hoping he had missed something in his calculations. 89 ships total, including cargo haulers that had been fitted with weapons during the colony expansion. Most of their firepower came from nuclear missiles and kinetic projectiles, while the aliens used energy weapons that could slice through the strongest human armor like paper. The countdown timer on his screen showed 48 hours remaining until the deadline. Every major news network was broadcasting updates about the crisis, while civilians on dozens of worlds packed whatever they could carry and headed for evacuation centers. Some colonies had already declared their intention to surrender independently, hoping the aliens would show mercy to those who submitted without fighting. Captain Danny Walsh arrived at Olympus Prime with a convoy of converted cargo ships that now carried enough explosives to level a small moon. His crews were volunteers who had signed up, knowing they probably would not survive the coming battle. Each man and woman understood that Earth needed every possible advantage, no matter how small. As Jake watched the alien fleet through his telescope, he wondered what kind of creatures could destroy entire civilizations without hesitation. The Zephyr had conquered hundreds of worlds according to their own broadcasts, and they spoke about exterminating humans like it was just another day at work. They had clearly done this many times before and expected the same result they always got. Hours remained when Jake received word that President Santos would address the planet in 6 hours. The decision had been made, and soon everyone would know whether humanity would fight or surrender. Jake already knew what the answer would be because he had seen the look in Santos' eyes during their last video conference. Some things were worth dying for, and freedom was at the top of that list. President Maria Santos stood before the cameras in the White House press room, knowing that her next words would either inspire humanity or condemn it to extinction. Behind her hung the flag of United Earth, while representatives from every colony world watched through secure video links. She had spent the last 6 hours reviewing military reports that all said the same thing. Humanity could not win this war through conventional means. Citizens of Earth and all human colonies, she began with a steady voice that carried across every communication network in human space. We have been given a choice between slavery and death. The Zephyrian Empire believes we will choose slavery, because that is what every other species has done when faced with their overwhelming power. They are wrong. War Commander Vexvel received the human response aboard his flagship while reviewing tactical plans for the coming assault. The massive vessel called Dominion contained enough firepower to sterilize a planet, and had done so 43 times during his career. He expected the humans to beg for mercy or offer to negotiate terms for their surrender. Instead, he heard words that made him pause the recording and listen again. We will not kneel before any empire. We will not surrender our freedom to purchase a few more years of life. We will fight with everything we have, and we will make them pay for every inch of space they take. To those who would enslave us, I say this: you picked the wrong species. The transmission ended, and Vexvel stared at the screen for several moments before ordering his fleet to begin the attack. In his 300 years of service, he had heard many species make brave speeches before their destruction, but something about the human response felt different. There was no desperation in their leader's voice, only cold determination that reminded him of his own people during their most dangerous wars. The first target was Tau Ceti 7, a remote research station, with only 300 humans studying stellar phenomena. The facility had no military value, and its destruction would serve as an example to discourage further resistance. Vexvel sent 3 cruisers to handle what should have been a simple demonstration of Zephyrian power. Station Commander Ben Taylor watched the alien ships approach while his staff worked frantically to evacuate non-essential personnel. The transport ships could only carry half the station's population, which meant someone had to stay behind to operate the defensive systems. Taylor volunteered along with his entire engineering team, knowing they were about to die for a cause that might already be lost. "Sir, the evacuation ships are clear," reported Chief Engineer Carol Murphy while monitoring the approaching Zephyrian vessels. "All civilians are away and heading for the jump point." Ben nodded and activated the station's experimental particle accelerator that normally was used to study high-energy physics. His team had spent the last 18 hours modifying it into the largest directed energy weapon humanity had ever built. They had no idea if it would even scratch the alien ships, but they were determined to try. The 3 Zephyrian cruisers moved into bombardment position, expecting to destroy the station with a single coordinated volley. Their shields were configured for standard deflection protocols, since no known weapon could penetrate Zephyrian defensive systems. The aliens had grown careless after centuries of easy victories against technologically inferior opponents. Ben waited until the enemy ships were perfectly aligned before firing the accelerator at maximum power. The beam of concentrated particles struck the lead cruiser's shield generators and overloaded them in a cascade failure that no Zephyrian engineer had ever seen before. The ship's hull cracked open like an egg, and atmosphere vented into space, along with half the crew. The other 2 cruisers immediately began evasive maneuvers while trying to understand what had just happened. Their sensors showed impossible readings, suggesting that humans had somehow developed weapons capable of penetrating Imperial shields. The station fired again, catching the second cruiser in its engine section and crippling its propulsion systems. Tau Ceti 7 exploded under concentrated fire from the remaining Zephyrian ship, but the damage was done. For the first time in their military history, the Empire had lost vessels to a supposedly primitive species. News of the engagement spread through both fleets within hours, changing everything about how this war would be fought. Admiral Morrison launched Operation Defiant Stand from Olympus Prime, coordinating attacks across the entire solar system. Captain Amy Rodriguez led the first strike force, using asteroid fields for cover while targeting Zephyrian supply ships that carried fuel and ammunition. Her destroyer Valiant had been retrofitted with mining charges that could punch through standard hull plating if delivered at close range. On Earth, General Pete Collins mobilized every factory and manufacturing center to produce weapons and ammunition. Assembly lines that had been making consumer goods switched to military production while civilian volunteers signed up for combat training. The planet's orbital defense platforms came online for the first time since their construction, revealing weapons systems that had been hidden from public knowledge. Dr. Rachel Moore finally made her breakthrough after analyzing wreckage from the destroyed Zephyrian cruiser. The aliens used energy shields that operated on specific frequencies that could be disrupted by electromagnetic pulse weapons if properly calibrated. She immediately transmitted her findings to every human military unit while beginning work on devices that could exploit this weakness. Commander Lisa Grant received the shield frequency data just as Zephyrian ground forces began landing on the lunar surface. Her base was surrounded and outnumbered, but the new information gave her people hope for the first time since the war began. The enemy could be hurt, and that changed everything about their defensive strategy. War Commander Vexful reviewed casualty reports that showed losses he had never experienced in previous campaigns. 3 cruisers destroyed and 2 more damaged by weapons that should not have been able to harm his ships. The humans were proving far more dangerous than intelligence reports had suggested, and their refusal to surrender was complicating what should have been a simple conquest. The High Council sent messages demanding explanations for the unexpected resistance while Vexful prepared for a longer campaign than originally planned. The humans had drawn first blood, but the Empire still held overwhelming advantages in numbers and technology. This war was far from over. The Zephyrian fleet moved toward Earth like a wall of death, bringing weapons that had destroyed countless civilizations across the galaxy. War Commander Vexful stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on his tactical displays. Intelligence reports suggested the humans had concentrated their remaining forces around their homeworld for a final, desperate battle that would end in their complete annihilation. Admiral Morrison coordinated the defense from Olympus Prime while every human ship in the solar system took position around Earth. His forces included cargo haulers, converted into bomb ships, and mining vessels armed with industrial cutting tools. Alongside the few proper warships humanity could field, the plan was simple because they had no choice but to be simple. Hit the aliens hard and fast before their superior firepower could destroy the human fleet. Captain Danny Walsh commanded a squadron of 20 converted freighters that carried enough nuclear explosives to crack a small moon. His ships had been stripped of everything except engines and weapons, creating flying bombs that could deliver devastating attacks if they could get close enough to their targets. Most of his crews were volunteers who understood they were flying suicide missions. Commander Lisa Grant watched the alien landing ships approach lunar base through her periscope while her defenders prepared for ground combat. The base's tunnel systems had been expanded into a maze of defensive positions connected by passages too narrow for the large Zephyrian soldiers. Her people knew the base better than anyone and planned to use that advantage to bleed the invaders for every step they took. Dr. Rachel Moore transmitted her final calibration data for the electromagnetic pulse weapons, just as the first alien ships entered Earth's orbital space. Every human vessel now carried devices that could disrupt Zephyrian shields if used correctly. The technology was untested in real combat, but it represented their only hope of evening the odds against superior alien defenses. The Battle of Earth began when Nextville ordered his lead squadrons to sweep aside the human picket ships and establish orbital control. His captains expected easy victories against primitive opponents, but found themselves facing tactics they had never encountered before. Human ships used debris fields and asteroid cover while launching attacks from unexpected angles that confused Zephyrian targeting systems. Walsh led his bomb ships in a desperate charge straight at the enemy fleet while friendly forces provided covering fire. 3 of his vessels were destroyed before they could reach their targets, but the survivors broke through the alien formation and detonated their nuclear payloads against ships whose shields had been disrupted by Moore's pulse weapons. Destroyers vanished in balls of atomic fire that lit up the darkness of space. The aliens responded with concentrated bombardment that destroyed half the human fleet in the first hour of combat. Their plasma cannons sliced through Earth's ships like they were made of paper, while energy torpedoes tracked down fleeing vessels and consumed them in expanding spheres of destruction. Morrison watched his forces being systematically eliminated, while searching for any weakness in the enemy formation. On the lunar surface, Grant's defenders faced the first wave of Zephyrian assault troops who had expected to find terrified humans hiding in simple bunkers. Instead, they encountered a network of interconnected tunnels filled with traps and ambush positions that turned their numerical advantage into a liability. Lieutenant Kevin Ross led engineering teams that collapsed sections of the base to trap alien squads, while Sergeant Nina Torres coordinated sniper teams that picked off enemy officers. The Zephyrians war-powered armor that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons, but the humans had learned to target their helmet seals and joint connections where the protection was weakest. Every alien soldier killed was immediately stripped of equipment that could be used against their former owners, while human casualties were replaced by volunteers who emerged from deeper tunnel levels. Morrison realized that conventional fleet tactics were suicide against the alien forces and ordered his remaining ships to break formation and fight as independent units. Human vessels scattered across the orbital zone using hit-and-run attacks that prevented the Zephyrians from concentrating their firepower. The aliens found themselves chasing dozens of small groups instead of fighting one large fleet that could be destroyed in a single engagement. Captain Rodriguez led her destroyer in close support of the lunar base defenders while using the moon's mass to block enemy fire. Her ship's weapons had been modified with Morse pulse technology, allowing her to penetrate alien shields long enough to deliver effective attacks. She coordinated with Grant's ground forces to provide orbital bombardment against Zephyrian landing zones. The battle raged for 18 hours before Vexville realized his casualties were far higher than projected. The humans were fighting with a combination of desperation and cleverness that made them dangerous opponents despite their technological disadvantages. His fleet had lost 37 ships, while the human forces had been reduced to scattered remnants that continued to harass his formations. Grant's lunar defenders held their positions through 3 major assaults that should have overrun their base completely. The Zephyrians controlled the surface installations but could not penetrate the tunnel networks where human forces moved like ghosts. Through passages their enemies could barely fit inside. Every attempt to advance deeper into the base resulted in heavy casualties and no territorial gains. Dr. Moore worked around the clock to improve her shield disruption technology while analyzing captured Zephyrian equipment. Each breakthrough was immediately transmitted to the surviving human forces, allowing them to adapt their tactics in real time. The aliens had expected to face static defenses, but instead found themselves fighting an enemy that learned and evolved during the battle itself. Vexville called for reinforcements while studying tactical reports that made no sense according to established military doctrine. The humans should have been completely destroyed within the first few hours, but somehow they continued to resist with increasing effectiveness. Their losses were replacing themselves with fresh volunteers, while his own casualties weakened the fleet's overall combat capability. The war commander began to understand that he was not fighting a conventional military force, but an entire species that refused to accept defeat. Every human seemed willing to die rather than surrender, while their leaders continued to coordinate resistance from hidden command centers. This was unlike any campaign he had fought in 3 centuries of Imperial service, and the outcome was no longer certain. 3 weeks of constant warfare had turned the solar system into a graveyard of burning ships and shattered dreams. War Commander Vexville reviewed casualty reports that showed losses he had never experienced in his long military career. 150 Zephyrian vessels had been destroyed or damaged by an enemy that should have been eliminated in the first day of combat. The High Council was demanding explanations while his own officers questioned tactics that were failing against primitive opponents. Captain Rodriguez stood in the briefing room aboard the crippled destroyer. Valiant planning, the most dangerous mission of her life. Intelligence gathered from the lunar tunnels suggested that the Zephyrian command ship contained central coordination systems that controlled their entire fleet. If a small team could penetrate those defenses and sabotage the alien communications network, the enemy formation might collapse into chaos. Dr. Moore had developed a new version of her shield disruption technology that could be carried by individual soldiers and activated at close range. The device was untested and unstable, but it represented the only way human forces could board an enemy vessel protected by energy barriers that normally deflected all attacks. Rodriguez volunteered to lead the assault despite knowing that most of her team would not survive the attempt. On the colony world of New Geneva, civilian administrator Paul Henderson organized resistance networks among farmers and factory workers who had never held weapons before the invasion began. The Zephyrians had occupied major cities but found themselves fighting a shadow war against opponents who melted away into the countryside after each attack. Every supply convoy was ambushed while communication lines were cut by saboteurs who struck without warning. Admiral Morrison coordinated Operation Broken Chain from his damaged command center while studying intelligence reports that showed supply lines stretched thin across multiple star systems. The aliens had expected a quick victory, and their logistics network was not prepared for an extended campaign against determined resistance. Human forces could exploit these weaknesses if they acted quickly and with precise coordination. Rodriguez launched her assault using a captured Zephyrian shuttle that her engineers had modified to carry Moore's disruption equipment. Her team of 12 volunteers included specialists in demolitions and computer systems, who understood they were probably flying to their deaths. The shuttle approached a massive command ship while broadcasting stolen identification codes that might fool the alien sensors for a few crucial minutes. The infiltration succeeded because the infiltrations had never faced an enemy desperate enough to attempt such a mission. Rodriguez's team penetrated the ship's outer hull using explosive charges and fought their way through corridors filled with surprised alien crew members. Half her people died in the first few minutes, but the survivors reached the central computer core where they planted virus programs designed to corrupt the entire fleet communication system. Henderson's resistance fighters struck simultaneously across New Geneva using weapons captured from defeated Zephyrian patrols. Children served as messengers while elderly citizens provided safe houses and medical care for wounded fighters. The occupation force found itself controlling empty buildings while the real population conducted guerrilla warfare from hidden bases. In the agricultural zones, the Zephyrian commander on New Geneva requested additional troops to deal with resistance activities that were tying down forces needed elsewhere. His soldiers were demoralized by constant attacks from opponents they could rarely see and never seemed to catch. Every patrol that left the secure zones was vulnerable to ambush, while convoys carrying supplies were systematically destroyed by improvised explosive devices. Walsh commanded the remnants of his bomb ship squadron in coordinated strikes against Zephyrian supply vessels that carried fuel and ammunition between star systems. His converted freighters used stealth technology borrowed from mining operations to approach their targets undetected before launching devastating attacks. Each successful mission disrupted alien logistics while forcing them to commit more ships to convoy protection duties. The virus programs planted by Rodriguez's team began spreading through the Zephyrian fleet network, causing weapons systems to malfunction and navigation computers to provide incorrect data. Ship commanders found themselves unable to coordinate with their squadrons while targeting systems locked onto friendly vessels instead of human targets. The technological superiority that had made the aliens invincible was being turned against them by human ingenuity. Commander Grant received reinforcements from Earth as civilian volunteers arrived at Luna base carrying weapons and medical supplies through Zephyrian orbital patrols. The tunnel networks had been expanded to include manufacturing facilities where captured alien equipment was reverse-engineered and adapted for human use. Her defenders now carried energy weapons taken from defeated enemies while wearing modified Zephyrian armor. Dexvel realized his fleet was falling apart as communication failures spread throughout his formation. Ships were firing on each other while supply convoys disappeared without explanation, and ground forces reported impossible resistance levels from supposedly primitive opponents. The humans had somehow corrupted his technology while maintaining coordinated attacks that suggested sophisticated military planning. Morrison launched the final phase of Operation Broken Chain by committing his remaining reserves to simultaneous attacks across the solar system. Every human ship and ground unit struck at predetermined targets, while the Zephyrian fleet struggled with computer malfunctions that left many vessels effectively helpless. The coordination required split-second timing, but human forces had been preparing for this moment since the war began. The battle for the asteroid mining station series became a turning point when human forces successfully captured an intact Zephyr cruiser whose crew had been incapacitated by their own malfunctioning life support systems. Captain Brian Lewis led a boarding party that secured the vessel and transmitted its technical specifications to every human unit in the system. For the first time, humanity possessed a warship that could match alien capabilities. Grant's defenders emerged from the lunar tunnels to recapture surface installations, while Zephyrian ground forces retreated in confusion. Their commanders could not coordinate defensive actions while orbital support failed to respond to requests for assistance. Human forces pressed their advantage using captured alien vehicles and weapons to drive the invaders back to their landing zones. Henderson's resistance networks coordinated a planet-wide uprising on New Geneva that overwhelmed the demoralized occupation force. The Zephyrian garrison surrendered after losing contact with their fleet, while human fighters secured strategic locations across the planet. News of the victory spread to other colony worlds, encouraging similar resistance movements that had been waiting for signs that the aliens could be defeated. The war had reached a turning point as Zephyrian technological advantages collapsed under sustained human attacks that exploited weaknesses no previous enemy had discovered. Vexville faced the possibility of defeat for the first time in his career, while his superiors demanded immediate results from a campaign that was spiraling out of control. 2 months into the war, the Zephyrian Empire faced a crisis that threatened the foundations of their galactic dominance. War Commander Vexville stood before the High Council's communication array, knowing his career and possibly his life depended on explaining how a primitive species had held the Imperial fleet at bay for so long. The massive holographic displays showed battle damage assessments that painted a picture of failure on an unprecedented scale. The humans are unlike any enemy we have previously encountered, Vexville reported while studying the faces of council members who had never known military defeat. They adapt their tactics faster than our forces can counter them and show no regard for conventional military doctrine. Every victory costs us more than anticipated, while their resistance grows stronger despite heavy casualties. Dr. Moore's team achieved another breakthrough when they successfully created a computer virus that could infect Zephyrian systems through their own energy shields. The digital weapon spread like wildfire through the alien fleet, causing ship computers to malfunction and weapons to fire randomly. Commander Brian Lewis led a group of specialists who refined the virus while developing new methods to deliver it directly into enemy command networks. The liberation of Mars began when Colonel Parker's forces broke out of their defensive positions using captured Zephyrian equipment combined with modified human technology. His soldiers wore alien armor, while carrying energy weapons that had been reverse-engineered by human scientists working around the clock in underground laboratories. The siege of New Olympia City ended when Zephyrian ground forces found themselves outgunned by opponents using their own advanced weaponry. Sergeant Tom Bradley commanded an armored division, equipped with construction mechs that had been converted into combat vehicles capable of standing against Zephyrian war machines. His forces used knowledge of Martian terrain to outmaneuver enemy units, while industrial equipment proved surprisingly effective against alien armor that had been designed to resist energy weapons but not massive hydraulic crushing forces. Captain Julia Fox led atmospheric fighters that dominated Martian skies for the first time since the invasion began. Her squadron used modified atmospheric processors as weapons platforms while employing flying techniques developed for asteroid mining operations. The aliens found their air superiority challenged by opponents who treated three-dimensional combat like an extreme sport rather than traditional military engagement. Admiral Morrison recognized that humanity had reached a strategic crossroads, where they could either pursue total victory or negotiate from a position of strength. The Zephyrians still possessed enough firepower to devastate human worlds, if driven to desperation, but their morale was breaking under sustained losses they had never experienced before. A negotiated settlement might preserve human independence, while avoiding the mutual destruction that total war would bring. The High Council reviewed reports from across their empire showing that news of human resistance was inspiring other conquered species to question Zephyrian authority. Several worlds had experienced riots while others showed signs of organizing independence movements modeled on human tactics. The war had become more than a simple conquest and was threatening the stability of imperial rule throughout their territory. Henderson's resistance networks on New Geneva had evolved into a planetary government that coordinated with other human colonies to share intelligence and tactical innovations. His fighters used weapons captured from defeated Zephyrian units while employing communication systems that had been modified to avoid alien detection methods. The planet had become a symbol of successful resistance that encouraged similar movements. On dozens of other worlds, Lewis successfully penetrated the Zephyrian fleet communication network and discovered that their forces were receiving contradictory orders from multiple command authorities. The Imperial chain of command was breaking down as regional commanders disagreed about how to handle the human crisis, while political leaders demanded immediate results regardless of military realities. This information provided human forces with opportunities to exploit enemy confusion. Grant's lunar base had become a fortress that controlled access to Earth's orbital space, while serving as a training ground for volunteers from across the solar system. Her defenders taught guerrilla warfare techniques to new recruits while manufacturing weapons and equipment using a combination of human engineering and captured alien technology. The base represented everything the Zephyrians had failed to understand about human determination. Parker coordinated with resistance movements on other colony worlds to launch simultaneous uprisings that would stretch Zephyrian forces beyond their ability to respond effectively. Each planet had developed unique tactics based on local conditions, but all shared the same refusal to accept alien domination. The coordination required precise timing and secure communications that human forces had maintained. Despite enemy attempts at jamming, Fox's atmospheric fighters began operating beyond Mars as human forces captured Zephyrian vessels capable of interplanetary travel. Her pilots adapted quickly to alien flight systems, while maintaining the aggressive tactics that had proven successful against enemy formations. The psychological impact of human forces using Zephyrian ships against their former owners was devastating to alien morale throughout the fleet. Vexwell received orders from the High Council demanding that he end the human resistance within 30 days or face replacement by a commander who could achieve results. The political pressure was enormous, but military reality suggested that crushing human forces would require resources the Empire could not afford to commit. Every day of continued fighting weakened Imperial prestige while encouraging resistance. Movements on other worlds. Moore's research teams discovered that Zephyrian technology contained fundamental design flaws that made their systems vulnerable to specific types of electromagnetic interference. The aliens had become so dependent on energy shields and computer-controlled weapons that they had never developed adequate defenses against the kind of creative sabotage that human engineers specialized in. This knowledge provided new opportunities for attacks that could cripple enemy capabilities. Bradley's armored forces began manufacturing new vehicles specifically designed to fight Zephyrian war machines using industrial techniques that had been perfected during Mars colonization. The combination of human engineering, creativity, and captured alien materials produced combat vehicles that were more effective than anything either species had fielded individually. These hybrid weapon systems gave human forces advantages that pure technology could not provide. The war had transformed from a simple conquest into a test of wills between two completely different approaches to conflict. The Zephyrians relied on overwhelming technological superiority, while humans used adaptability and determination to overcome seemingly impossible odds. As the fighting continued, it became clear that one philosophy would prevail while the other faced fundamental changes to its understanding of warfare and galactic politics. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the flagship New Earth, watching the combined human fleet prepare for its most ambitious operation since the war began. Ships from every major colony had gathered under Earth's banner carrying weapons that combined human engineering with captured Zephyrian technology. The fleet would travel to the enemy home system not to conquer but to demonstrate that humanity could threaten the heart of Imperial power wherever it might hide. Commodore Rodriguez commanded the vanguard of 47 vessels that included converted cargo haulers alongside proper warships captured from defeated enemy forces. Her crews represented every human world and carried Dr. Moore's latest innovations in shield disruption technology and computer viruses. The journey to Zephyrian space would take 6 weeks, during which human engineers continued improving their weapons while preparing for the most important battle in human history. War Commander Vexwell received intelligence reports about the approaching human fleet while struggling to maintain order among his own forces. 3 months of constant warfare had reduced his armada to fewer than 200 operational vessels, while morale had collapsed among crews who no longer believed in inevitable victory. The humans had proven that Zephyrian technology could be defeated through superior tactics and unbreakable determination. Colonel Parker joined the fleet aboard a captured Zephyrian cruiser that his engineers had extensively modified with human weapon systems and defensive improvements. His ground forces were prepared to conduct planetary assault operations if necessary, but Morrison hoped the threat of such attacks would be sufficient to force Imperial surrender. The psychological impact of human forces operating deep in enemy territory might accomplish more than actual combat. The High Council convened emergency sessions to address the approaching crisis, while reports arrived from across the Empire describing resistance movements inspired by human success. Dozens of conquered worlds were showing signs of rebellion. while Imperial forces struggled to maintain control over populations that had learned humans could defeat Zephyrian military power. The war had become an existential threat to Imperial stability. Captain Juliet Fox led reconnaissance squadrons ahead of the main fleet using stealth technology adapted from asteroid mining operations. Her pilots gathered intelligence about defensive positions while avoiding direct contact that might alert enemy forces to the approaching human armada. The information she transmitted allowed Morrison to plan his assault with detailed knowledge of enemy capabilities and weaknesses. Lewis and his cybernetics team worked continuously during the journey to develop new computer viruses specifically designed to target Zephyrian home system defenses. Their programs could spread through enemy networks faster than previous versions, while causing more comprehensive system failures. The digital weapons represented humanity's most sophisticated technological achievement and would be crucial to the coming battle's success. Commander Grant coordinated with resistance movements throughout Zephyrian space using communication networks that had been established by human intelligence operations. Her contacts provided real-time information about enemy troop movements, while sabotaging supply lines and communication systems. The coordination between human military forces and alien resistance groups created a strategic situation the Empire had never faced before. Henderson's experience organizing civilian resistance on New Geneva proved invaluable as he helped coordinate uprisings on multiple Zephyrian worlds simultaneously. His knowledge of guerrilla tactics and psychological warfare was transmitted to alien populations who had learned to view humans as symbols of successful resistance against Imperial oppression. Each rebellion forced the Empire to commit resources that weakened their ability to defend core systems. The Battle of the Seven Moons began when human forces encountered Dexvel's final defensive line at the border of Zephyrian home space. The War Commander had positioned his remaining ships around a system of 7 natural satellites that provided strategic defensive positions while allowing for coordinated fields of fire. His forces represented the last intact Zephyrian battle group capable of preventing human forces from reaching their ultimate target. Rodriguez led the initial assault using hybrid tactics that combined human creativity with captured alien technology. Her ships approached through asteroid fields while jamming enemy sensors and deploying Moore's computer viruses through direct data transmission. The Zephyrians found their defensive systems corrupted while human forces attacked from unexpected directions using weapons specifically designed to exploit Imperial weaknesses. Parker coordinated orbital bombardment support while his ground forces prepared to assault the moon-based installations that controlled Zephyrian defensive networks. His soldiers used captured enemy equipment alongside human innovations to penetrate fortifications that had been designed to resist conventional attacks. The combination of technologies created capabilities that neither species possessed individually. Fox's atmospheric fighters engaged Zephyrian interceptors in battles that ranged across multiple moons, while her pilots demonstrated flying techniques that confused and demoralized enemy forces. Human fighters used three-dimensional tactics developed for asteroid mining while employing weapons that could penetrate alien shields through electromagnetic pulse attacks. The psychological impact was as important as the tactical advantages. X realized his position was hopeless as human forces systematically destroyed his defensive installations while avoiding the concentrated firepower that had previously made Zephyrian positions invulnerable. The enemy had learned to fight a different kind of war that made Imperial technological superiority irrelevant. His communications with the High Council became increasingly desperate as the human fleet advanced toward the Empire's core worlds. The breakthrough came when Lewis successfully infected the entire Zephyrian command network with a virus that caused their ships to target each other instead of human vessels. The Imperial fleet began firing on itself while human forces pressed their advantage through coordinated attacks that exploited every weakness their enemies had revealed during months of warfare. Zephyrian formation discipline collapsed as ship commanders lost confidence in their equipment and leadership. Morrison transmitted surrender terms to the Zephyrian High Council while his fleet took position to threaten their homeworlds directly. The message was simple and direct, offering peace in exchange for recognition of human independence and protection agreements for other species threatened by Imperial expansion. Emperor Kixtara faced the choice between accepting defeat or watching his civilization destroyed by an enemy he had underestimated. The war ended when the Emperor broadcast his acceptance of human terms while ordering all Zephyrian forces to cease hostilities immediately. Vexful received the surrender order aboard his crippled flagship, knowing his military career was finished, but grateful that his species would survive their encounter with humanity. The humans had proven that technological superiority meant nothing without the will to use it effectively against determined opponents. Ambassador Helen Carter arrived to negotiate the final peace treaty while President Santos prepared to address the Galactic Council as an equal among the stars. The agreement established human sovereignty while creating protection protocols for species threatened by imperial expansion. Humanity had earned its place in galactic politics through courage and sacrifice rather than submission to alien authority. 5 years later, Santos stood before the assembled representatives of dozens of species, while Admiral Morrison provided security for the historic session. Her words echoed across the galaxy as she delivered humanity's final message to those who might consider future aggression. We are not conquerors, but we will not be conquered. We are not aggressors, but we will defend what is ours. Remember this day and think carefully about the price of underestimating Earth.